Hi, everybody. This is Dan, and welcome to the Having Initiative podcast. First of all, if you're listening, thank you very much for showing up. Like everybody and their mom, I've started a podcast, so I know that you have a lot of options out there. And so I appreciate you taking a little time to listen to mine, and I hope we go forward with that. This is the very first episode. And this episode, I'm going to talk about why I'm here, what I'm doing this podcast for, and what's going to be going on in this podcast going forward. So that's the main thrust of it. So today's talk, I'm just going to go right into it, is going to be about, have three big chapters, more or less. The first part is about initiative. I'm going to tell you some stories about people who have done incredible things that are hopefully inspiring and don't inspire you to do more and don't make you feel bad about yourself. The next chapter is I'm going to talk about how we have more power than ever before. Knowledge is power, as they say, and thanks to the internet and various other media and whatnot, we have more access to information than ever before. And then the third chapter, if you will, we're going to talk about having a clear perspective. Now, that aspect of it, that is the main thrust of this entire podcast, is talking about everything that goes before we take action with initiative. And it's going to be a broad array of subjects. And so I hope that's that. Hope that clears things up a bit. Now, a quick anecdote before I just get going forward. One thing that really inspired me is that I go about my life. I have interactions daily with people. I get advice and feedback about other things to look at. And I listen to podcasts, people talking on YouTube, that kind of thing. And sometimes it's like I listen to 5 different people on 5 different podcasts. Maybe it's the host or their guest. And you get like 5 different perspectives. And they're kind of talking in the same area. And it's like, I wish I could just say I could get these 5 different people together in one room, because it seems like they're all agree, slightly disagree. And maybe if we put them all together, they could fine tune their ideas or whatnot. Or maybe we could get clearer, that kind of thing. So that's what we're going to do today. So with that, I'll just hop right into it. Okay. Having initiative. That's part 1. William Kamkwamba, I'm sorry if I butchered your name, sir, was born into relative poverty somewhere in Africa, and he had to drop out of school at an early age to help his family with their farm. They lived in a rural area. But he really wanted to continue his education. So, as a result, he would, whenever he was done helping the family or whatnot, he would walk to a local library where he would basically study to his heart's content. Now, one thing that fairly early on he did, he was good at fiddling with radios because he had a few technical books about that. And I think he had a bit of a rapport for doing that. And so where he really comes to fame is, I don't know the exact circumstances, but to help out with the farm, he needed a little electricity. And so he built a wind turbine with various junk lying around. And it worked. And it really helped the farm out. And that's how I heard about him. And you may have heard about him too. I think there's a Netflix film that involved Chiwetel Ejiofor about him. But just to recap, he had to drop out of school. And he was young. He wasn't in like the age where he was starting technical school or something. This was maybe high school at the latest. And he learned from reading books, and he did something pretty darn impressive. I mean, I don't know how to build a wind turbine. I don't know about you. And so basically he had the initiative to try and do something. So that's William Kamkwamba. We'll loop back around to him in a bit. A story number 2 to talk about, Gaston Glock. He was in Austria, and in the 60s or so, he was working in the curtain rod industry. That's what his craft was. He was, I believe, involved in building them. And then the 70s, he started more working with knives. I don't think they were for military applications, probably like kitchen cutlery, but maybe they were. And then in the late 70s or maybe early 80s, the Austrian armed forces announced that they were going to upgrade their World War II service pistol, and they were accepting submissions for that. And I don't think it was like anyone off the street could do it, but basically they weren't strictly going to go with weapons manufacturers. They were much more open. So for some reason or another, Mr. Gaston Glock decided to give it a shot. So I think to recap, he had worked building curtain rods and building knives. And so he enlisted the help of a few associates of his that specialized in making cameras, and they tried to make a gun, basically. And for those of you who aren't familiar with firearms, Glock is a brand of firearm, a manufacturer, and they make pistols primarily. And that is Glock is the brand. It is the most popular handgun for particularly law enforcement in the world. And I'm an American. I live in America. We're allowed to have firearms here. Glock is one of the favorite concealed carry guns because it is so easy to use and it's very robust. Now, Glock, as I've said, had no experience making firearms, but he made something that basically kind of changed the world in a way. Now, a lot of people, this is kind of a sidetrack here. A lot of people take his lack of experience with this kind of thing and say that that would disqualify him or put him at a disadvantage. Now, and in terms of discovery or innovating, in a way, it was useful because he wasn't bound by convention. You know, technology isn't a straight line. There's many different ways to reach an end. And while, yes, working off of what has been established, that is definitely useful, you'll avoid pitfalls and you'll have certain things that work. By trying something completely new with no experience, he didn't have to fall to other pitfalls that convention may have that we just accepted as an acceptable loss kind of thing. And a quick side note about him, when he was testing this gun, because again, he had no idea what he was doing. When he was testing one of his pistols, he would shoot in his offhand and keep his good hand safely tucked away out of sight. In case the gun he was shooting exploded, he wanted to make sure he still had a good hand. So we'll loop back around to him again, but Gaston Glock, Austria, made Glock. Another story, Frederick McKinley Jones. He was born sometime in the mid-1900s, I believe, maybe a little earlier. And he was orphaned at the age of 7. And he went into, I think, an orphanage, something like that. He had basically conditions to take, certain situations to take care of him. But at 11, he left whatever schooling he was in and got a job as a cleaning boy. Again, this is age 11, 6th grade. And if you're not American, Harry Potter's first year, that's how old he was when he's like, I'm joining the workforce. Now, we hear stories about this all around the world of people, boys and girls, not being able to reach their full potential because they had to leave school at an early age to help out with some sort of physical labor task. And he did that. But he seems to be a pretty smart guy because at around the age of 14, he got a job as a mechanic. And I have a feeling that he experimented a bit to test his skill and prove that he could do it. I don't think they just had no experience hired him at 14, but maybe they did. But anyway, so he was working as a mechanic at 14, and there he was largely self-taught. To the best of my knowledge, I can confirm he never went into a formal technical or mechanical or tradecraft school. It was all on-the-job training and just his own experimentation, his initiative to learn more. And so as a result of that, here's a couple of the things he either invented or made his own version of. Portable cooling units. Portable X-ray machines, a form of movie ticket dispenser, a radio service for doctors, a sound track synthesizer, and various other things. Now, what's the common line through all those things besides that they're mechanical? Maybe the more technically minded of you may know that there's a similar architecture, but to the best of my knowledge, those things are very distinct, and he just was self-taught about learning these things. So Frederick McKinley Jones, smart guy. So with these 3 stories, I wanted to just drive home. All of them were in less than ideal situations for what they eventually ended up doing, but they had the initiative to try or to learn, and then they did it, and the results were very successful. So back to William Kamkwamba, who built the wind turbine. I've worked jobs that are physical labor, and oftentimes when I was done, I didn't want to do studying. I just wanted to chill and relax because, I mean, I was working in customer service, so maybe that's part of it. But you get tired and you just want to recover after that. But he would walk a long ways to go to a library to learn. And then he had no experience building anything. But hey, we need a wind turbine. Why not me? I'll do it. And I'm sure with this gentleman and all of them, there's more nuance to what they did. I don't mean to brush over their accomplishments. In fact, I'm in awe of them, if that's not clear. And Gaston Glock, again, when he was testing one of his firearms, he shot in his offhand to make sure that his good hand would be safe in case it exploded. It was a dangerous endeavor, but he made something incredible. And I don't know his financials, but I have the feeling that he is well off now because of how popular his firearms are. And then Frederick McKinley Jones orphaned at 7 and then left school at 11. And then what he ended up doing, that's impressive. And again, he was working as a cleaning boy. I mean, again, I've worked jobs with janitorial duties. They're not fun. And when you're done, I was kind of like, I don't want to do anything other than just chill or play video games. But he was experimenting and learning and became a mechanic 3 years later. Now, there's some that are listening to this that might say, well, they're just naturally gifted. Maybe they're savants or they have a special endowment for that kind of things. And you know what? Maybe that's true. But none of them had formal education in what they sought out to do. No formal education. They were self-taught and they experimented and had on-the-job training. That's it. But they also had initiative. All right. Instead of waiting for someone else to do it or telling themselves they couldn't, they tried and they were successful. So that's a couple of stories about initiative and things that have inspired me, and I hope that inspire you. Because so many people today have the idea of improving their lives or doing something that they want to do. I mean, apart from like going on a trip, although that could be part of it too. Starting your own business, improving themselves as a person, but they don't do these things because something gets in the way. They like the idea, but they don't have the initiative to do it. And so I hope with the various things that you hear in the podcast, you will start to do the things that you want to do. All right. So the next topic I want to talk about is that we have more power than ever before. About knowledge is power. So here's a quick little story about a couple of things. Back in 2009, the video game Assassin's Creed 2 came out. And for those of you that don't know, Assassin's Creed is a video game where you play as a character in 3D space where you're running around and trying to do various missions of some kind. But the key staple of these games is that they take place in various historical periods. And more so at the beginning of the games, I haven't played the more recent ones, they were very big on historical accuracy and historical authenticity. And so Assassin's Creed 2 took place in the Italian Renaissance. And so like in the game, there are doctors that can heal you, and they would be wearing plague doctor masks and that whole get up, that kind of thing. And there were painters that would provide art for your palazzo kind of thing. And that's how you improve the game. Now, there were also, as you walked through the cities, these guys on these wooden platforms who were just shouting out information. Well, not shouting, just loudly announcing information. The town criers, if you will. And they were there to announce what the government had to tell the commoners or the church had to say, or even sometimes personal ads could be taken out. And there's a funny little joke that sometimes they needed armed security to protect them when they announced tax hikes so that they wouldn't be attacked. And the reason why they needed these town criers is because this is like 1472 or 76 through 1500 when this game takes place. And the printing press hadn't been developed yet. And so the majority of the population was illiterate. And even if you could read, getting access to books was difficult because I think they had to be handwritten at that time. I don't know if there was a process in between handwriting and the printing press. And so if you can't read, then you're entirely at the mercy of getting information verbally from other people. And that's not great. Now, I think it was 1500 when the printing press was developed, but even then it took them a little while to iron out all the kinks and to get the process smooth. And so, but once the printing press came out, then words could be mass produced and distributed, like just even with pamphlets. So you wouldn't need that town crier for things. You could just put up like a bulletin board. I mean, or the 1500s equivalent of a bulletin board in the public square, advertisements, that kind of thing. And for a long time, that was the dominant means of communication, of just posters, flyers, pamphlets, and whatnot. But guess what? Now that these pamphlets are getting out, if you want to be able to get the information in them, you got to be able to read. And so literacy became something that was incredibly important if you wanted to get out of poverty or just learn more. Because they had apprenticeships, sure, but now information can be disseminated by reading. So you don't have to be shadowing one person for that. And of course, there's more nuance to that. So fast forward to the present day, there's a meme going around the internet that it's normally has two parts, but the first part is always, it shows a classroom in black and white, and it looks old, and it says education in 1920s, and it has the kids lined up in nice, neat rows, and they're attentive to the what I suppose is the teacher at the front of the classroom. And then next to that picture, they have another one that's modern day, kids in rows, and they look bored out of their minds. The fashions are updated and whatnot. And it says education now. And then normally, so that's the first part of the meme. Normally, the other part is that it'll show like a Model T or the Wright brothers, and it'll say cars or planes then. And then on the right side, it'll show like a Tesla or a fighter jet or something, and it'll say cars and planes now. And the whole gist of that is that they were criticizing the notion that technology has leaped forward drastically in 100 years, but education didn't seem to do that. Now, there is nuance to that because learning in person, as we've seen with COVID, is not antiquated. But at the same time, there is a point about how maybe we should take a look at how we're doing things and maybe try and do them better. And the other thing that I hear so much these days from various people, sometimes it's whenever someone's trying to do something and they don't know how, or they're interacting with someone who is ignorant of some seemingly basic knowledge, and the person says they should teach this in school, finance or economics or how to grow food or how to handle your taxes. They should teach this in school. And for some of those things, they got a good point. In fact, one of the podcast episodes that I'm planning is all about education and my thoughts on how we should improve or whatnot. But as I said before, thanks to the internet, we have more access to information than ever before. And a lot of those things that people are saying they should teach in school, I mean, most of these people have like iPhones or smartphones, and they have a data plan, which means they got the internet. So if they want to find out about these things, it's not that hard. So the question is, do they have the initiative to do it? Now, I think with the school metaphor, they should teach this in school kind of thing. What they're getting at is that someone should have forced me to learn this so that I would do it, because I know I can look it up right now, but that would take effort. And oftentimes it's about, finances and stuff. It's not the most exciting thing. Some people are into it. But if this is important to you and it affects your life, then why hold off and wait for someone else to do it? Have the initiative to learn yourself. Or if you want your kids to know something, learn it yourself and teach them. So that's the first half of how we have more power than ever before. And yes, there's a lot of information out there. And you as an adult don't just blindly pick the first website and you see that explains something. You have to use your discretion or whatnot and decipher what is true and whatnot. And I'm sorry, I keep saying whatnot. Decipher what is true and false or what you don't know. And that is the gist of my next episode, actually, deciphering that kind of thing. So another caveat to how we have more power than ever before and having initiative. Okay, back in 6th grade, I was in my math class, and the teacher was talking about the plan for the rest of the year and what we would need to know by the end. And she was talking about the district standards, I believe, or maybe it was the state. And since it was math, there was some sort of constant. It wasn't multiplication tables. It was some sort of constant or rules that were part of kind of the beginnings of Algebra 1. And she told us that these constants or whatnot were important to know, but the state didn't require that students memorize them because they thought it was asking them too much. We should focus on the theory kind of thing. And my math teacher says that's baloney, because her son, who was in 5th grade, knows all 150 Pokemon and their element types. And yes, this totally dates this conversation. 150 Pokemon. You heard that right. That's when this was going on. So it was just a testament to how even children at a young age can handle a lot of information. Now, her son obviously liked Pokemon, and so he didn't have to be told to do that. He did it all on his own, but he still had the initiative to explore. Maybe it was the video game, maybe it was a book, maybe it was a. I mean, the internet wasn't wonderful at the time, but internet articles or whatnot, magazines, and he found out what he wanted to know just by searching for it and giving it its due time. So, and another example, today, celebrity culture is a thing, and there are people who are big fans of certain celebrities, and without being asked, without having to be paid for it, they will go through Tumblr and Twitter and the news sites and fan forums and find out every bit of information that is publicly known about that person. And they will, some of them, will believe anything they say, but some of them will be very scrutinous and will identify what has been confirmed and what is pure conjecture, but they will still be, paying attention for any new information that can either affirm or deny those things that are conjecture. And the third caveat is, think about Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or video games like Halo. They're sci-fi and they have a big fan following. For each one of these, Wikipedia, the online encyclopedia, well, there are offshoots of that are basically Wikipedias solely dedicated to those subject matters, like Lord of the Rings and Star Wars. Star Wars is called Wikipedia, and oftentimes they have they're a play on some kind of pedia or some kind of wiki. And these things, to the best of my knowledge, are not created or run by the creators of those things. The Lord of the Rings wiki is not maintained by, to the best of my knowledge, not maintained by the estate of J.R.R. Tolkien, and I don't think George Lucas was involved in Wikipedia at all. These are done by various fans who wanted an online resource for their vast amounts of knowledge of all the things going on in these books and movies and video games and whatnot. So with those three stories, the fifth grader who knows all the Pokemon, the fangirl who knows everything about Ian Somerhalder, or the Star Wars fan who loves Star Wars and they're not going to look at someone else's encyclopedia. They're going to make their own. And don't even get me started on the Pokemon ones. Those are the most in-depth, in my opinion. They can find any information they want, and then they can do whatever they want with it because they wanted to. They had the initiative to do so. And with the power of the internet, they had more power than ever before. So I hope that we can understand, if you can apply that much effort to something like Pokemon or celebrity culture or Wikipedia, if there's something in your life that you don't like to do, but is essential part or whatnot, that you don't know how you're going to do it, or you're scared of trying, take a little bit of that initiative from those fanboys and whatnot and just apply it elsewhere. And you'll be amazed at how far it goes. Like, treat this as if it was something that you cared about, that you wanted to know more about. And that will help so much. And that's a big part of this podcast, is getting people to, learn more, obviously, but just go forward with it. So the third chapter in this is about perspective, decision making, what to do with our initiative and the information we have. And again, this is kind of the main thrust of the podcast as a whole going forward. There is something called the OODA loop, sometimes called OODA, that was made by United States Air Force Colonel John Boyd. Now, I'm going to give you the short version of it. I'm sure I'm looking at the explanation of it right now. It's actually much more complicated. But the OODA loop stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. Now, I believe his treatise is this is the process that goes on, but I think today more people talk about it how this is a tool for making decisions. If you want to learn more, feel free to look it up. But it's about decision making. So observe, you look at what is before you, and orient, that's about taking inventory of it in its original form, taking inventory of yourself and all of your biases and whatnot, deciding what to do, and then acting. So I've had people, I think some of them were in firearms training or maybe in the military or whatnot, that swear by the OODA loop, but they noticed that some people that were doing it weren't having the best outcomes. And so the question came up, is OODA all that it's cracked up to be? And one guy that I heard kind of summed it up, which is that the loop in itself is fine. It's a tool. The problem he observed was that people weren't observing correctly and they weren't orienting correctly. And that affected their decision making and their acting. Now, y'all may not know Sun Tzu's Art of War. There's this adage in there. I may butcher it. My apologies. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you need not fear the outcome of 100 battles. Now, most people, when they hear that, they get what it's about, but they don't go all the way with it, because the problem with this is that most people don't want to take an honest look at themselves and see their own flaws. And if there's someone that's their enemy or opponent, oftentimes it's someone they don't like, and they don't want to give that person any credit at all. And so they don't really see them for what they are, the good and the true nature of the bad, quote unquote. So that ties to the basically apply that to observe and orient with any kind of decision making. People weren't truly observing, they were riding off of their biases or whatnot. And so they weren't orienting themselves properly. And so their decisions weren't the best, and therefore their actions were ineffectual. So the main thrust of this podcast is largely going to be about the kind of observe and orient of various topics, that kind of thing. So if you've made it this far, thank you very much for listening, and I hope you come back. My next issue is going to, or episode, is going to be about decision making and taking inventory. It's going to be called What We Know and What We Don't Know, and I'm going to dive into those topics. And that I'm really excited about that one. I think it's something really important that I don't hear much about. So I hope that y'all listen to it. So once again, if you've made it this far, thank you. And yep, I hope to see from you again. This is Dan from Having an Initiative. Peace out. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me. So if you're listening to this and you listen to the audio podcast on Apple or wherever, this housekeeping you're listening to right now is new. So this is Dan from the future. So thanks again for joining me here on YouTube if you're listening. And right now, my goal is to, with season 1, to release 2 of these episodes a week. Don't hold me to that, because the software I use to make this is finicky at best. But that's what's going to happen here. Season 2 is coming along quite nicely. I'm looking forward to sharing that. But right now, we're releasing everything on season 1 on YouTube. So let me know what you think about this episode in the comments here. Like, comment, subscribe, and click the notification bell. And really, if you're listening, thank you for taking time out of your day. And I hope to hear from you soon. Thanks, everybody.